Thanks for coming along, everyone. We might get started now that we've waited for a few more people to join us, and more might trickle in as well. Just a reminder that the session is being recorded, and I'll hand over to our program manager, Fiona Norton, to start us off.
Thanks so much, Dave. Hi, everyone. I really want to warmly welcome you all to this session. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Fiona Norton. I'm the State Manager of Programs for Victoria, which means that I oversee emergency services, our migrant and our community programs. So thank you for being here today as we kick off our pre-season preparedness briefings. So as we gear up for the high-risk weather season, it's so important that we're up to date, aligned, focused and ready for the challenge that's ahead of us. So this briefing will cover a range of topics and information, and importantly allow us to discuss any preparedness questions you may have as well. As Dave said, we're recording the session and we'll share that across the divisions and teams. Thanks, David, who's now going to take us through the briefing. Over to you.
Thanks, Fee. As we start off today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're all dialing in from today. For me, I'm on Wiradjuri country, and I extend my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I hope that in our work in emergencies and while supporting communities, we can learn from the wisdom accumulated over millennia by the oldest living cultures in the world. I'm hoping now everyone can see the slides that are on the screen.
No.
Oh. Okay, let's shift that to...
I can see them.
Yes, I can too.
Yeah.
I can. Yeah, I got it.
Can't see.
Fantastic. So for those people who can't, you might just have to select the view to make sure it focuses on what's being presented rather than the presenter. There'll just be some dots in there, and if one of the state team can help out in the chat with some instructions, that'd be fantastic. I'll crack on for now. So the session today is going to be a little bit about some reflection on the previous season. We'll talk about the seasonal outlook for the summer coming up. We'll talk about transformation, the internal changes associated with that, and the external changes in the sector and emergency management more broadly in Victoria. We'll go through some readiness, some of the activities that we've all been putting into together to contribute to our readiness as an organisation for this season. We'll talk about some wellbeing as well, and we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So just another reminder, the session is being recorded. So for those people who aren't going to be able to make it tonight, then they'll be able to view the session on the VIC ES YouTube channel a bit later on. There is a chat function and there is a Q&A function available for you to submit questions or comments as we go along. If you'd like, chuck them in there and I'll address them at the end. Similarly, if you want to write down any questions, we'll address those at the end as well together. First one's going to be a bit of a reflection piece. So here's a bit of a snapshot of what emergency services have been doing across the country in Australia with Red Cross. So going from the end of July last year and June this year, we're looking at 71 events that emergency services have responded to across Australia. That means 51,600 people have been supported through 1,462 emergency service volunteers and staff, ultimately deploying 189 people across interstate activations as well. So this slide shows you a bit of a breakdown as to the hazard types associated with those activations. You'll see in VIC we've got 3 there for collective trauma events, we've got 3 for fires, and we've got 3 for storms as well. So many of you would have been active in those activations. And from the whole state team, we just want to say thank you so much for contributing to those. The volunteer time that we put into this, that we all put into this, is just a huge effort. Everyone does something to contribute to supporting people on their worst days. So thank you so much again for what you've been doing and what you continue to commit to do through the movement. Some little summary as well as far as the activities that have been involved in that work over the last 12 months includes some of the resilience work which some of you would have been involved in. It means delivering pillowcase sessions for the most part this year as well, with 96 sessions 96 schools ultimately delivering 262 workshops in those schools for the year. In that, 7,609 people were part of those resilience activities. Again, most of those were pillowcase sessions. Some of those were get ready and ready plan sessions as well. The focus now that we have transformation and an intentional resilience officer through Matt Bristow means that we can expand our focus to more of those other sessions as well, rather than just looking at pillowcase. The recovery program, which some of you may already know, wound up this financial year as well. Or sorry, the financial year just gone. So in that last year, 34 volunteers were involved in recovery activities. 1,538 community members and practitioners were trained through the workshops and training sessions delivered by the recovery program with staff and volunteers across 51 workshops in Victoria. So in the photos here, you can see a snapshot of some of the sessions as an example of those recovery activities. We've made into local and other news sources as well for our working dog sessions, which is so much fun to go along to. There's a photo down there of the Dargo community and their work through ready communities. And we also have a session there with communicating and recovery. So with the stats, we classically underreport our stats. So these are just really conservative numbers when I present these. It looks like in that 12-month period that our volunteers in Victoria contributed 13,708 hours of their time to support communities across the state, which is just absolutely fantastic. In that, over 1,500 people were supported with PFA. There were also 13 single incidences. So these are 13 single incidence events that are in addition to the emergency activations that we saw in the slide earlier. And in that as well, we provided 14 interstate deployments to Queensland this year as well. Despite some serious communication challenges in the last few months with transformation, which Fee will get into shortly as well, I want to stress that we're still listening and want to keep listening so that we can learn to do better in the way that we support communities out there and make sure that everyone has an amazing volunteer experience. There's lessons learned after action review towards the start of this year as well that captured a lot of that information about how we can learn to do things differently and do things better, as well as recognizing some of the strengths that we've got already in what we do to show that we can lead in that part of the sector as well. So there are about 20 lessons all up in that after action review, and I've consolidated them to these themes that are in common, just to kind of show that we do recognise that we've got a long way to go as far as improving our services, improving our experiences, and the work that we do to support communities. But also, we've got a lot of strengths that we together, as VIC bring to that service as well. So some of those strengths really sit around the impact that we have in communities. And despite not necessarily being able to provide training on collective trauma events, the people who were involved in that did an amazing job. And we got feedback from agencies and from the community on that. For the training that we did deliver, that got really good feedback from everyone who was involved. And the team leader and activation training especially has been something that people have been really proud of and wanting to get involved in across the country. There's sessions that are happening across borders as well, which I'm sure Anthony and Jamie are going to talk to a bit later on. A lot of people shared concerns around the lack of volunteers and being constantly asked to do rotations through the IMT and in the field, and struggling to use the systems in place for those IMT activities as well. That's something that we're still really working on, and it's something that, like, our training and engagement and support through that process is something that we'll need to focus on through this season as well. There was a lot of confusion as well around Register, Find, Reunite, how to fill out the forms correctly, making sure that they were easy to read and enter in a consistent manner, and how we share information and how we dispose of those forms to protect people's privacy, which is also something we've been focusing on at a national level to make sure we have consistency across that and we can deliver that to people on the ground as well. Finally, one of our strengths again was around collaboration, that our briefings, that our communication, and that our work in the field was supportive of what we needed to do, and people in those roles felt like they knew what they needed to do. Now that we have the new structure in place, which Fee and I will talk to a little bit later on, we've been getting pretty good at nutting through some of these challenges until we have a way forward and a way to improve things. So the lessons on this particular page are the focus that we have at the moment as well that we'll be working on through the season. For the seasonal outlook. So for this one, I'll show you a video and then summarize some of that information through the following slides. So I'll show this one now. You might want to turn your volume up or down depending on the volume in the video, but I'll just hit play for you. I've watched it multiple times today, but no one else has to. We'll provide the link for that later on afterwards, after the session as well, in case people are interested in going through that again. For now, we'll just go through some of the information and have a bit of a focus on Victoria as well as we go. So in that, we saw some of the flood risk that was associated with rainfall in there. So we'll have above average rainfall for much of the eastern seaboard, but not necessarily Victoria. Rainfall is likely to be in typical range for the western half of the country, near average outlook for flash flooding, and rainfall in Victoria is likely to be within typical seasonal range. The Indian Oscillation Dipole and the El Nino Southern Oscillation is neutral for now. Regarding heat and heat waves, the chance for heat waves is increasing as we approach the warmer months. Increased chance of unusually high max temperatures across Australia. Around Australia, ocean temperatures are likely to remain higher than average through summer. And again, these links will be provided in the chat so that people can do further research if they'd like to. AFAC has released a spring bushfire outlook for 2024, so there will be a summer outlook that is released in the coming weeks, which we'll also share through our State Office report. For us, if we're looking at a picture of Australia as well, increased risk for a large part of Northern Territory and Queensland. An early start to the season for Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania, and increased risk is driven by unseasonal rainfall, increasing fuel loads in parts of Northern Australia. Communities in both high and normal bushfire risk areas are encouraged to remain prepared and vigilant through the season. So we've just had one of the warmest Augusts on record, and we've just had some of the driest autumn and winter on record. If we'll look at Victoria very shortly as well, but it does show increased risk of bushfire in the areas in red. The rest of the area is not increased bushfire risk, but still potentially dangerous through bushfire season. So for Victoria, this is the zoomed in image of our particular state to show that much of the increased bushfire risk, again, increased bushfire risk, not the only bushfire risk, is in the west and southwest parts of the state. If we were to look at an overlay of that with our divisions, you can see that it covers Sunraysia, Wimmera, Inner Grampians, Outer Barwon, Inner Barwon, and again, it's a case of increased bushfire risk, not necessarily no bushfire risk. So deadly and damaging bushfires can still happen outside of that red shaded area. Some other hazards as well that we could be exposed to this year is avian influenza. So as most of you will know, the H7 strain had now breakthrough Victoria and ACT earlier this year. That was first detected in May 22nd of May. And in total, that meant agencies provided 13,000 FTE days to respond to those outbreaks. In that process, 1.3 million birds were destroyed. And they're in the position now to continue to clean up contamination to provide that proof of information from that strain. However, what we're being warned at the moment is that the H5 strain is what they're referring to as the game changer. It's already present in every continent in the world, even Antarctica, except for Australia. It's detected in marine and land mammals, including cats and cattle, and there's been a few human cases as well. It's very destructive in commercial animals and in extensive impacts on wildlife globally. The view of experts in this particular hazard is that it's a case of when it comes to Australia and not if. When it does come to Australia as well, the high-risk areas will be wetlands and migratory species, and very high likelihood of affecting water birds, seals, and dolphins. Just a reminder as well that we've looked at floods, heat, fire, and avian influenza. There is the potential this season for events to be happening concurrently. We may not just be responding to a single hazard. So before I talk about the centralised team in detail, I'll pass over to Fee to provide an update on the transformation process.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. We thought it was important to probably spend a little bit of the time today as part of the pre-season briefing to just reflect on the transformation process and what those changes will mean and what the structure looks like as we head into high-risk season. So as many of you are probably already aware, the whole of Australian Red Cross has been through a significant transformation. That transformation has pretty much been in response to a range of external drivers like climate change, policy, governmental change, changes within our local and national communities themselves, philanthropic giving, and shifts across some of the sectors that we work in. There's also been a range of internal drivers for the change and the transformation, such as continuing to drive our core services into areas of need and to maintain our financial sustainability. So we're about week 8, I think, into our new ways of working through the transformation that was finalised around June. And leading into the high-risk weather season, it's really important that we're all aware of what the changes mean to the way that we operate, particularly in an activation. So Dave's going to take us through what the changes mean in response and activation, but your VIC ES team remains in place. So there's Anthony, Ray, Jamie and Matt. We're still recruiting to the role that Graham fulfilled, and you'll see there's also reporting in my space is a couple of, there's an migrant, MSP stands for Migrant Support Program, and there's also a new role that we've got that's going to be supporting the Dargo community in Gippsland with a particular resilience project, which is a pilot that goes till June next year. So our team is still in place and will still be continuing to work with you. But what changes you will see are what Dave will probably walk through with you now. So Dave, over to you.
Thanks, Fee. So one thing that I'd really like to stress as well is some things have changed, but a lot of things have actually stayed the same. So what we provide on the ground hasn't really changed. It's just the way that we manage it that's shifted a little bit. So as some examples of what's changed and what hasn't, from the 26th of July, the Centralised Response and Operations Team, which I'll show you a chart of shortly, was established. And that's where you've got Stu O'Brien shifting to a new role and myself returning to a role in Victoria, where we're supporting the VIC team through that centralised structure. And I'll go into more detail about our role shortly as well. So even though that has changed, Victorian Emergency Services staff continue to work with and support our volunteers. So the same faces that you're used to seeing, Anthony, Ray, Jamie, Matt, Fee, and then +1 when that position's filled as well. Those people are all still there that you can contact through your normal channels as well. So another change is that each state and territory used to have their own duty officer arrangements. Now this is transitioned to the centralised duty officer mechanism that's managed by that centralised team. So we still run a duty officer service. The existing 1-800 number is still being used by Victorian councils and by activating agencies to activate us in the field. It's just that's going to be diverted to the new phone number, with that roster being managed by just a different group of people. Oops, sorry, I'll go back. Each state and territory ran its own IMT during activations, with some support from NCC. Now the IMT structure, or Incident Management Team structure, will be located and structured in a way that makes sense for the scale of the response needed at the time. So sometimes it'll be based in the state and territory that the activation is happening in. Sometimes it'll have some presence in the state and some presence in the centralized team. But what hasn't changed really is that volunteer divisions will still be supporting and running their own local activities with support from the state office. And those members as staff and volunteers that are normally part of the INC will still be part of the INC regardless of where it's situated. So when those larger activations are happening, it just means we get additional support from the centralised team. Our workforce capacity and training coordination is now happening centrally, but the Victorian L&D team still continue to develop, deliver and support the Victorian training for our volunteers and staff. For the structure, I know the details are a little bit fine in this, but it is a really big structure, so it's difficult to capture on one slide. But here was just to show that we've got the Manager of Emergency Services is now Amanda Aridi, reporting to Nicola Cray, who's also the Victorian Director, but holds the portfolio for emergency services and response. So in that team with Amanda Aridi is Eleanor Carter, who's leading the incident coordination team. We've got Megan Barry, who you'll all know is leading the emergency response team. And we've got Annette Plowman, who previously used to work in the NT as the state manager up there, is now the emergency workforce manager. So as the specialist emergency response, which I didn't introduce myself earlier, that's what I do now, sit in Megan Barry's team to support the response operations and activities, including our incident management, our reporting and quality, and our stakeholder engagement, and understanding our arrangements and obligations under the SEMP, all sit with me in my role. Stu O'Brien, which a few of you will already know because he's already been working in VIC as well, is the specialist for emergency workforce. And I might just get Stu, if he's online, to pop up and introduce himself if he's here.
Yes, I'm here. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Stu. Some of you would have met me in my former role within the state team, yeah, now I'm in the specialist workforce role. So good to see you all.
Fantastic, thanks Stu. So Stu's going to be that person who's in charge of introducing VIC workforce, really supporting the state team to understand what they do in training and delivery, those training modules, that specialised training as well, and supporting those interstate deployments and pre-season training. So Stu and I sit in the centralised structure, but our everyday job is to support Victoria in its response operations and workforce. Our centralised team, I mentioned before, it consists of the coordination, response and workforce teams. So coordination ensures the organised and efficient disaster response. They oversee the coordination of disaster readiness, response activities and application of incident management frameworks during emergencies. And we very much see those at more active in the higher level events, more intensity events. The response team delivers effective and timely response activities during emergencies in each of the state and territories. We ensure that the local needs are met while adhering to national standards and protocols. For workforce, they develop, train and engage nationwide workforce capable of rapidly responding to multiple disasters simultaneously. So together in that centralised structure, we'll maintain a duty officer mechanism, which I already discussed. We develop and maintain specialist pools for incident management response. We fill and support incident management team functional areas while maintaining business as usual activities. We provide advice and guidance on emergency management and response. We also facilitate emergency response information, practice and process sharing to Red Cross people and support services. What I'll do now is there's a lot of information in those centralised slides as well about what the team does. We'll have a lot more exposure to what me and Stu do as we head into the season as well. And if you do have questions on that structure, please chuck them in the chat or the Q&A for us to address at the end and we'll go through them together. And right now I'll hand over to Fee, who will take us through some of the changes in the sector.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Part of the briefing, we thought it was important to just remind folks of changes that are happening in the sector that have already happened and that potentially might come online. So there's a few that are really probably most important from a pre-season briefing perspective. One is around regional relief coordination. As you know, relief is coordinated at a tiered level, so either at the local, regional, or state tier. and councils are responsible for local or local tier coordination of relief. Previously, DFFH were up to, till recently, DFFH were responsible for the regional relief coordination, and Emergency Recovery Victoria held state and regional recovery coordination. So what's happened is that as a result of the sort of establishment of Emergency Recovery Victoria, and as a result of the broadening of their remit, they are now have also picked up regional relief coordination of the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing, DFFH. That happened as of September 30. Look, there's no change to Department of Family, Fairness and Housing role in social recovery or relief, i.e. their emergency relief payments. They'll still be present in the relief space. You'll see them at REM, like Regional Emergency Management Team meetings, and locally on ground. It effectively, what the change means is that effectively Emergency Recovery Victoria will take the lead around the coordination of all of the agencies and organisations that have responsibility in relief. So you shouldn't see any changes in relation to that. But the biggest change potentially is if you are in a regional meeting or exposed to that, there'll just be a different lead. It won't be DFFH. It will be Emergency Recovery Victoria. It hasn't changed or will not change the way we work with DFFH around the delivery of their services and the delivery of ours. So that's just really important to note. So the other impact for the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing is that it's proposed through the upcoming legislative change that the Department of Families and Fairness and Housing will be removed as a legislative member of MEMSES, and that's as a result of the shift around regional relief coordination. They'll still probably be present in almost all MEMSES, but if and when we're activated and or prior to activation, it's just an important thing to note when that legislation amendment takes effect. Again, doesn't change their role or responsibility or our work with them or engagement, just important to be aware of. The other thing that's happening at the moment, and that I thought it's useful to raise today, is around the Vulnerable Persons Register. As you know, Red Cross has a role in supporting people on that register when we're requested to do some emergency planning, so preparedness planning, so conducting ready plan sessions with them. DFFH at the moment is actually leading a revalidation of the VPR. Essentially, it means that they're working with councils to make sure everyone on it is true and correct and removing any people that no longer need to be on it. But as a result of that, there may be some additional call on us if they're identifying people that need to be on the register and that are placed on the register for us to go and conduct that emergency planning component of that. So our role hasn't changed regarding how we support clients that are on the VPR, but we just may get a few more questions and queries, and hopefully around providing that level of planning support. But hopefully what it means is that the register will be cleansed a bit prior to this high risk weather season, and we'll have both councils and Victoria Police will have a much clearer idea of the level of support that's needed in communities. The other thing I wanted to raise was around the State Emergency Management Plan. That's been in the review of that, and the updates to that have been in place for quite a few months now. What's important is that our role really hasn't changed, but we've clarified the wording and tried to remove any ambiguity in relation to our role across a range of different things. We haven't changed what we do materially, but what we have done is ensure that we clarify what we do a little bit more clearly. There's a link that will be shared with you. The role statement's available. We've issued the role statement as well during the process months ago. But if anyone has any questions or queries and wants a copy of it, please just email us and we'll send it out to you. But again, noting that the role statement in a state emergency management plan is the overarching. It doesn't necessarily guide the work that we do locally, but there may be slightly different arrangements pending the organisations that work at the municipal level through municipal plans as well. The other really exciting thing is that we're currently in conversation, and this may occur, we're thinking this may occur hopefully by December, but we've been talking to Victoria Police and Emergency Management Victoria, who coordinate and run the State Control Centre, about utilising Register Find Reunite in a proactive way for catastrophic bushfire danger rating days. So we do this quite regularly in other states and territories in Australia with their relevant sort of agents that sort of support Register, Find, Reunite. And we did it for the first time in Victoria for the February catastrophic bushfire danger rating day. And it's one of the first catastrophic FDRs, fire danger ratings, that we've had for some years. So we actually proactively activated RFR for that one, talked to Vic Pol, and that spurred then a conversation about how we could do that and push that into our arrangements more formally. Again, it doesn't change our role. It doesn't change the work that we do in the field. Normally, what would probably happen is the inquiries would be open online. If we were activating a relief centre, we would undertake our normal role in relation to Register, Find, Reunite at that time. But I think what's really exciting about that is that it's solidifying really both the role of Register, Find, Reunite and the role of Red Cross, and how important that reunification piece is, and understanding how to work with people both in evacuation for really high risk catastrophic days, but also how we potentially return people to their properties as well in conjunction with Victoria Police. So there's some of the broader changes that it's just useful to be across. If there's any others that sort of come to the fore, and we will share those with you through the State Office report or others as the season progresses. And if there's anything that actually comes out of some of the work you might be, or some of the sessions you might be going to locally, if you're doing preparedness sessions, please let us know if we haven't picked it up, and we can go forth with that. So proactively activating RFR, thanks Stephen, means that we don't have an emergency yet, so there's no fire, there's no relief centre, but people have been told to, because it's a catastrophic danger rating, generally there's about 2 days advance notice of a catastrophic fire danger rating day. What happens is that we'll activate even in the absence of a fire. So anyone evacuating their property or their community can register, and they can indicate proactively what that, you know, if it does turn into anything, we already have their details, and then we can support reunification as quickly as possible. So that's what proactive means in that sense. It's just that there hasn't been an emergency yet, but we anticipate there may be one happening. Thanks, Jan. Can we be asked to visit anyone from the VPR? I thought there were specific projects supporting this initiative. We get requests through council. Council make referral to us. It generally comes through to the State Office. It may also come through, depending on your relationships or arrangements with local councils, direct through to divisions, but it comes through and they make a request of us, and then we share that with divisions and you conduct a ready plan session. But we will make sure that we share that process again with the revalidation of the register as it goes forward. So because the likelihood is, Jan, that we'll probably see a few extra requests as a result of the cleansing of the data that they hold. We won't have access to the VPR, so the actual register itself, that hasn't changed, but we're likely to get a few more requests. Yeah. That's probably it for me. As I said, we'll update if there's anything more that comes through. But again, if you're hearing things through your briefings, please let us know if we need to be aware, and we can add them in future State Office reports so we can share them a bit more broadly. Thanks for that, Dave.
No worries, thanks, Fee. And if people have more questions as well, keep putting them in the Q&A or the chat function, and we'll be able to go through them at the very end as well, so we don't miss anyone. So now for our readiness, some of the activities that we've been putting together and our capacity at the moment. I'll hand over to Stu to go through these ones, as he's the specialist who supports VIC State Team in doing this. Stu, if you want to just let me know when you're ready for the next slide as well.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Dave. All right. So, yeah, just on this graph, we're looking at the numbers from 2023, which are in the blue, and then in the green ones, 2024. So we can see that there has been a decline in both states, except for SA and NT. And there's been a few reasons for that. We've had some feedback, but some of the things are around fatigue, health and well-being, disengagement, competing priorities, work and family commitments, and past activation experiences. And I don't know if any of those are also the speak up training, if anyone knows anything about that. That might play into it as well. But hopefully with this new structure, the transformation is done now. We'll look to getting some of those numbers back up again over the next 6 to 12 months. Yep, next slide, Dave. And this is a very busy slide, but just a bit of a breakdown of the numbers of some of the areas. So you can see up the top left there, we've got around 381 field team members, who are ready to be deployed. We've got a commander pool of 10. We've got some liaison officers, safety and wellbeing advisors. So yeah, look, we can build these numbers up again over the next 6 to 8 months, 6 to 12 months. That would be great as well. Yeah, that's it for that section. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Stu. And we'll come back to you in a sec as well with some other points as well. But just some other activities that we've been getting into. We've got the Emergency Operations Centre. We've done a hardware check of that one, so we know that the monitors are there, the thin clients are set up, so when people come in to do their shift in the incident management team, the structure, the hardware, the computers, everything they need to be able to do their shift and their functions is ready to go. A lot of people would have heard about the office move as well. So we've also got an extension of that buffer. If we are in activation, then we continue using the existing EOC until the end of January next year. For our further engagement, I'm contacting the IMT functions directly and organising some check-ins, some walkthroughs, depending on the training and engagement needs recognised in those teams. So those are ongoing for the next 2 months as well. Where we can, we'll be providing refresher training for each of those functions and activities as needed. And I'll just pass over to Ray to talk about the MEMCs and the kits.
Sure. So, as Fee mentioned, we are actively engaging with our municipal emergency management planning committees across the state. So maintaining that solid presence at these committee meetings and promoting our emergency preparedness activities, such as our pillowcase and emergency ready workshops to the local government and other emergency services agencies. So really promoting our readiness work and also ensuring that we are also in that state of readiness in those forums. Now, in terms of kit checks, many of you are probably familiar with our Register Find Reunite kit audit that we did last year. So we completed a huge audit and refresh of all kits across the state last year. Now, RFR kits are audited every 2 years, so we're not required to do another round the grounds audit of those kits this year. We won't have to do that until next year. So that's nice. In terms of activation kits, they were also audited and refreshed last year around the same time as the RFR kits. Likely your kit hasn't been used since then. However, those kits that were used earlier this year during those activations, if they've been used and haven't been fully refreshed, which I'm sure they have, but yeah, you're welcome to get in touch with us if you'd like support with an audit of your kit. Even if you think, something might be missing and you want an updated content list, reach out to us. We can give that to you and you can just tick off everything in the box to make sure it's ready to go. And that's all I have on kits.
Thanks, Ray. For point 4, 5, and 6, I'll hand over to Stu to talk to these points.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so PFA, just a reminder to everyone to check your PFA expiry date. If your PFA is going to expire in the next 6 months, you'll just have to do a refresher so that 3-year period kicks back in again, and then you won't have to worry about not being able to be activated or deployed. If you're not sure about when it's expiring or can't find it, just get in touch with someone and we'll be able to look that up for you. With Reds, if you can just check your availability again on Reds and make sure that that's up to date as well, that would be fantastic. And just double check your photos. Some people putting photos up of their IDs. We've deleted some of them that we found. We just want your very nice smiling faces. We don't need all your license details and things like that. So just a simple mugshot is good. We're up to uniforms. If you need some new uniforms, there is a uniform order form that is on Reds, but we can also share that as well. And just to get in touch if you have any questions as well about uniforms. And the final point there is just on Red Cross vehicles. So we have 6 vehicles at the moment, which is down a few, I think, from last year. If there's a chance that you're likely to be using a Red Cross vehicle over the summer, you will need to book that through Plumtree, which requires a Red Cross email address. So if you don't have a Red Cross email address and you think that that's something that would be needed, get in touch with one of the teams and we can set that up, and that'll save us running around during an activation or anything like that. And that's it for those points. Thanks. Pass back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Stu. So on that as well, we've mentioned training a couple of times. Here's some options that are available for psychological first aid and some others, but I'll just quickly go over to Anthony, who can go through these in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks everybody for coming in tonight. It's lovely to see so many people coming into the meeting tonight. Look, firstly, I just want to thank you all so much for your contribution to the training, particularly over the last 12 months. It's been a little bit quieter because we haven't done a lot of recruitment, but we've still had 569 training completions done by you over the year. So well done, and thank you so much for continuing to engage in that. So that's including webinars, face-to-face, and the workshops that we've been doing over the past 12 months. So what have we got coming up before the end of the year? So we do have psychological first aid skills courses, webinars, and it's pretty exciting because we've all been able to get together, the states and territories, and share psychological first aid skills training places. So what that means for us is that there's plenty of opportunity for us to do that training should we need to. So you'll see there we've got some delivery from New South Wales, also from Queensland. So it's a great initiative, and one of the things that's really benefiting us from the transformation process, and a great example of how we're working together. So that's opened up a whole lot of capacity for us, which is wonderful. Also, the team leader activation training also has been delivered nationally and is continuing to be done so. So building on the great work that you've all contributed to by coming along, those of you who've come along, we're now delivering that, and the national team, the central team, delivering that across the country. I have very limited places. If you're interested in that, please reach out and have a chat to us. It's also on Reds. Also, we're running some what we call Ask Us Anything sessions. So what would they be? Well, they're a session where you can ask us anything, to state the bleeding obvious. So we've had some really good take up on that. Sometimes we've had up to 5 people come into those sessions, and it's a great opportunity for you to come in and ask us any of the questions, any of the curly questions that are on your mind. We're running those sessions regularly, Wednesdays and Thursdays. So you'll find them in Reds. So if you've got a problem that you can't solve, if there's just a bit of information that you need, if something's nagging at you, please come in and have a chat to us. We've covered topics like uniform requests, how to get into the training, and all that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for those. That's a really good resource for you to be able to step into. We do have a preparedness workshop that's coming up that is in Reds on the 30th of October. The workshops that we've been running this year have been both around the team leader activation and also the preparedness work that we do. So what's a workshop? A workshop is a session that runs for about an hour and a quarter, where we come in and we have a chat about a particular topic. For this workshop for the preparedness, Matt Bristow is going to join us and talk to us about his work in resilience and how you can get involved in that work, both individually and as a division. But we've covered a whole range of topics over the year, and those sessions are going to continue. So that's about it for me. Just again to thank you all for the great work that you've done over the last year. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Anthony. So before we finish up and head into the Q&A, I just wanted to say some stuff about safety and wellbeing as well. The nature of our work in emergency services typically means that we're going to be active because something dangerous or distressing has happened, but it doesn't mean we can take our eye off the ball, and it doesn't mean we don't take safety and wellbeing any less seriously. If we don't each take a level of responsibility for our own well-being, then we can't be sure we're delivering the best possible support to the people who are going through the worst day of their lives. We need to keep ourselves well so that we can do well. In that, there's a whole bunch of strategies and policies and frameworks and applications that we can use as an organisation to support that safety and support each other's well-being, from briefings to fatigue management standards to rostering correctly, and a whole range of resources that we can use. But when it comes to safety, if you're not sure, report it. Remember your training on this. There is an online module on using those applications, on escalating things to your team leader or your team convener, or the operations function as well, or someone from the state office who can make a report for you. If you don't report it, we don't see it. If we don't see it, we can't make it safer for the next person. So in that, we all need to look after ourselves. Yeah, we all need to look after ourselves, but we also need to look after each other as well. So the last point is, a lot of people will be familiar with the IWC checks, the independent wellbeing checks that we can get. So once we are activated, then we can get a call from another volunteer. So it's a peer support service where we can talk about our activation, how we're looking after ourselves, any kind of like self-care or further support that we might need as well. So it's a big one. It's an important one. They'll call you after an activation. You'll get more information if you are activated as well. But it's just one of those functions, one of those resources that we have that when we take seriously, we can do much better. So I'll open up the floor now to Q&A. So I think the team have done a pretty good job so far of monitoring the questions in the chat and addressing them directly. But if we've got some that haven't been answered yet, let's read them out and fire away and we'll get the answers. Stu.
There is a question in the actual Q&A section. So
Awesome.
Just in case that gets missed.
Okay, what is the current pathway for ES volunteers into IMT roles? Great question, Madeline. For that one, contact the workforce team who can handle that directly. They'll probably refer it to me and I'll have a chat with the function leads, but ultimately it'll be a conversation about what you might be interested in. But first point of call will be to contact the workforce team through that email that is in the chat.
Dave, do you want to just briefly explain what the functions are in the IMT as well, just so people can get a good overview if they've never come across it or understood what the IMT does?
Yeah, so a whole bunch of people in the field doing incredible jobs supporting community members is what people normally do when they think of Red Cross Emergency Services. So that PFA, that registration, the evacuation centre work, the relief centre work, all that happening in the field is made possible in the background by a bunch of people in the incident management team. So in that, there's a group of people who are sitting in an office or sitting at home, like remotely working or working in person, and it's associated with the AIMS structure. So it's Australasian Inter-Service Incident Management structure, which most emergency service organisations in Australia use to coordinate things at scale, at different scales. So in that, we've got commanders, we've got planners, we've got logisticians, and we've got operators and safety and wellbeing as well. So it basically means all the things that we need to do in the background to make sure our volunteers can do the best they can in the field is managed in a centralised structure. So the commanders, usually people with heaps and heaps of experience that have worked their way up and can make sure that they make the right decisions on the day to make sure that any decision that is made is in line with what we have to deliver in the SEMP, our responsibilities to the organisation and to our volunteers and to the community. So the planning team are people who take in information and analyse that so we can make the right decisions. So there's the strategic unit who understand the context. There's a situation unit as well. So it's all about understanding everything, all the information that's out there, so we make the right decisions about how we respond. They also make the sit reps and things as well that you might see later on. Then we've got the operations team, who are the ones who you talk to on the phone when you're in the field. So if you're a team leader while you're in activation, your point of call will be the operations cell. So that's where you get your advice, your support, and when you do your reporting at the end of the day as well. And then we have the logistics function as well, which pretty much makes sure everything is available. The people are available, the resources are available, the finances are available, everything's paid, everything's done. They move a lot of things around. They're really good with using their heads on the fly. So I think I saw something come up in the comments there. Yeah, thanks, Stephen Sennett, who's one of our commanders. The AIMS training is fantastic. I'm not sure if there's an online module at the moment, but I'm sure between Anthony and I, we can have a chat about doing some refreshers towards the end of the year. And thanks, Alice, for reaching out for planning as well. It's probably one of my favourites.
And Anthony's feeling left out because you didn't mention state trainers, although they're not technically in the AMT.
Oh, as in Stephen Sennett is a state trainer as well? Gotcha. Yeah. Cool. Any more questions? Have I missed any? Have we missed any?
Anyone have any questions about sort of the expectations or maybe what the weather might be sort of doing or anything like that? So has use by VIC of RFR data for law enforcement purposes been ceased? Very good question, Stephen. So essentially, so just to make it clear, so register, find, reunite. So there were some instances in the past that actually started with the 2022 floods, and we saw it again in the Jan to March events that happened this year. So for people's benefit, what we were advised was happening was that local police members were going to relief centres and they were asking for access to the register, find, reunite forms that Red Cross hold, and they were reviewing them for persons of interest. So technically what that means is they were looking for people that may have had criminal offences and or need to be separated from the general population. That is not an allowed function under Register, Find, Reunite. It is not something they are allowed to do. During the 2022 floods, I had immediate conversations with the Senior Police Liaison Officer and one of the assistant inspectors, and we tried to put a stop to that straight away. Recently, Megan, Barry and I went to the Victoria Police training for MERCs. So they're the Municipal Emergency Response Coordinators. So the coppers that you'll see generally in tabards at relief centres. And we actually had this conversation, and their senior management in Victoria Police took all pains to be very clear with all of those members that it is not the use, they are not to use the data from Register, Find, Reunite in that way. It was very clearly articulated, hoping that there was about 70, 80 odd MERCs in that room. So we're hoping that that won't happen again, but please, if you are in a relief centre and you see that happening and you're asked, we don't necessarily expect you to be at the forefront of sort of telling the police what to do, but please escalate that immediately into the incident management team and we will deal with it on the spot. Victoria Police, one of the chief inspectors explained it really well at the MERC conference when someone said, but hang on a minute, what if there's somebody that is potential risk to children? And he said, okay, well, what other mechanisms would you use to identify those people? Oh, we've got teams here we could contact, we can have this payment. There are ways that they can manage it rather than utilising a service where they are not allowed to access the information for that purpose. And so they were able to kind of nut out how they would manage through their own Victoria Police avenues, how to address that situation. So we're hoping that that's put a little bit of a kibosh on that use again, but you never can tell. So if you see it happening in any relief centre, please let us know. When we last did RFR, we had the police factor the forms to upstairs. Is this changed? Sorry, Colleen, I'm not sure I understand the question, but maybe you can reframe it for me and I'll go to the next one, VPR related. With the validation, has that included a review refresh for councils and local stakeholders about the definition of vulnerable people? Clearing up the names on list is great, but the definition has always been challenging. Thanks for that, Steve. I've just gotten the guidance document now, and I'll review it for that particular issue before they issue it to councils and others. Vulnerable presence in that context has for the VPI has a very specific definition. I'm not a fan of using the term vulnerable person, but I'll have a look for that specific thing. So I'll take that on notice, Steve, and I'll come back to you on that.
So we have some questions coming up in the Q&A now, but before we do, Anthony, you just got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Sorry, 1 sec. I was just going to respond to Colleen's question because she said about faxing the forms.
Yep.
Look, it's highly unlikely we'll use faxing because of the nature of the nature of the confidentiality of the information, but we will have, if we are in a major event where we're having significant numbers, we'll have a specific methodology for the transfer of the data from relief centres through to the state office team so the data can be input, probably similar to the way we did in the 2022 floods, where we had either police bringing the forms to us or we were, in some instances, collecting them from relief centres. But thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, AT?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I just want to jump in on the RFR piece. One thing we've learned through the team leader and activation training, and we've really worked hard with our team leaders for them to understand, is that the escalation process is just so important. Your operations officer is going to be very interested. As one of the commanders, I can speak for the whole pool. We are going to be very interested. And then we'll be straight on the phone to Fee, and Fee will be on the phone to whoever she needs to be if we can't solve it locally. So the thing that we've really drawn out with the team leaders is that there is a whole escalation process that sits behind you all and supports you all. So if you ever find yourself in a situation like that, please just reach out. And we are there to help you, and we're ready. And these are the things that we're thinking about.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, Lynn, you've got a question about the office move?
I can answer that.
Yes, we had our team meeting on Saturday.
Yeah.
And, you know, where is it? When are we going to be able to get in there? You know this is going to happen in the middle of an activation.
Yeah.
Do we have car parks? We know we've got a gym. What ends up, Fee?
Okay, so we are moving to 637 Flinders Street in Docklands. It has been a revamped building. It was the old police headquarters, believe it or not. It's now been revamped and it looks very lovely. There is, we'll be moving in the end of January. We're currently, the central response team are currently going through a business continuity, a plan that if we are in an activation, how we transfer from the offices in Village Street to that new office that will have a what do you call it? A area designated for the control centre, the AOC. Thank you. Brain is ceasing to function. I don't know why, and it's only 7 o'clock. In relation to car parks, that's going to be a much different story than what we have now. However, I will look into that in relation to activations. During the day is going to be harder. We have very limited car parking on site. There is a building next door for parking, and we'll make sure that we communicate with any IMT volunteers in relation to accessibility, both public transport and parking, recognising that some people may have access and mobility that needs to be considered, and for others it may be evening and or early morning safety issues as well. So, safety considerations rather than issues as well. So we'll come back to everyone on that, Lynn, as part of our regular kind of updates.
So where are we going to have a cage?
So there is a storage facility, yes. It won't be as big.
Cage downstairs where if you want it, you've got to know which corner.
I'm sure the team want to lock me in the cage most days. We'll have a storage facility. It will not be anywhere near as big as what it is now. I think much to Mandy and Ruth's happiness for their coordination and management of that area. But it'll be much smaller. We will have stock on hand and we will have resources and materials on hand, but we also will have off-site storage that we'll be able to go to and from to make sure it remains stocked, but it won't be as big as it was.
Okay, so if we need the van for like upcoming events in March, where will we get that from?
So in relation to vehicles, we'll come back to you because we need to review. So currently the two big vans need to be reviewed for size and accessibility for the car parking. So we'll be reviewing that shortly and coming back, but we'll have vehicles available for use. It's just it'll be, I think we do have car spaces where the pool cars will be kept on site. So it'll just be the same process as you currently have now. It'll just be a different pickup collection point.
Okay, thank you.
No worries, Lynn. Good questions. Can I just fully ignore the good question about the uniforms? Oh, I feel like it's a minefield. So can you let us about changes with the new logo? I'm still wearing a circular badge. There's a lot of uniforms that I'm a bit triggered about this. There's a lot of uniforms that are still out there potentially across the border and across the country that need updating. Ray, I might flick to you in just a minute, just in relation to sort of updating of uniforms across the board and if people need things updated or need to be returned, the process for that. But we do have a range of new uniforms, and if you do need to access those or swap them over, we'll need to facilitate that for you. But Ray, did you have anything you wanted to add? It's such a challenging sort of situation with uniforms.
Not a whole heap to add, but yeah, I think we've all had enough of uniform changes, but alas, they do keep happening. If you do have a circular logo and would like to swap it with a newer shirt, you're welcome to do so. In the state office report, we've got the reply paid number so that you can return the uniform with free shipping, and we can do a changeover for you. Now, if you are ordering a new uniform, best to go through the uniform request form. It's also in the state office report and on Reds. I think I've put it in the chat earlier this evening. The old shirts with the circular logo had a really narrow fit and they were funny sizing. These newer shirts are more standard sizing, which is detailed in that description, but just noting, if you are used to sizing down, you won't have to sizing up, you won't have to do that with these new logo shirts. But yeah, more information about that uniform return is in that state office report, and you can send it back to us.
Thanks, Ray. I've kept my black fleece. No one's taking my black fleece off me.
Don't mention that to too many people. Fantastic. Are there any final questions that we need to address before we finish up tonight? I'll just leave 5 more seconds in case someone forms something, preferably a curly one, a red herring.
I don't have a question, but maybe just something to note. And I'm sure this isn't a new idea, but I did think, if you are arranging team meetings over the next little while and various team members have certain questions or want to learn something new, it might be worthwhile combining, getting your team together and joining one of the preparedness workshops or even the Ask Us Anything sessions so that you can all have that shared information and learn together. So it might be an idea for any upcoming meetings.
Thanks, Ray. There's one more question in there, Fee, in the chat.
I'm switching between the Q&A and the chat. The chat's
Yeah, sorry. I thought it was one or the other, but it turns out both work. Sorry about that, everyone.
Is changing uniform a requirement or is it optional? Really good question. We should be following the current uniform standards. So where we can, we should definitely be maintaining the current requirement and style. But cool. It's a progressive change. You don't all have to run out and grab everything and then chuck it all at Ray and the team. I think they'll have a heart attack. Just as you can, just start to make sure that we're meeting that requirement over time is fine. And if we're in an activation, you don't that's our focus at the time.
And last question in the sorry, Lynn, were you about to speak?
So I still have some of the beige shirts and hats.
Oh wow.
Should I keep them for posterity or just you know.
When you're ready, we can collect them, Lynn, and take them off your hands. But yeah.
Oh, Matt's coming tomorrow.
Okay, there you go.
Load them up.
I'm having a home visit.
Oh, they're good if you want to go north. Yeah.
That's true. There's one more question in there, Fee, from Helen Martin, if you'd like to address that one as well, and then we'll cut off the questions, I reckon.
I was just coming back to you, Helen, on that. What we'll do is we will come back to you on that. We'll take that question on notice and we'll have a chat to you. I'm sure there's something we can work with you on in relation to that. Because actually, we must have great hearing, because we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago around where some of our property and stuff was being stored offsite in other areas, and we do have different arrangements across the state with different other organisations like the SES or the Lions or Rotary and some halls, if you like, so that both supported by either the ES volunteers or members. So we're just doing a bit of a review and a refresh of all of that. So your question comes right in a very timely way. So we'll reach out to you, Helen, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fee. That's excellent.
No worries.
Thank you. In the chat, you'll see as well that I've put in some links for your own reference as well, if you'd like to do some reading or some viewing at your own time. There's the climate outlook from the Bureau of Meteorology. There's the role statement from Australian Red Cross on the Emergency Management Victoria website. There's some heat health warnings as well, and the heat wave warnings as well that for your own reference too. And lastly, if I can find my notes, I'd also like to thank you for your contribution to the movement and supporting communities to get ready and recover from emergencies. Thanks for coming tonight and engaging in the Q&A, and for those who are viewing the recording afterwards, thanks for clicking that link and having a look at it as well. It's fantastic. And thank you to the team for supporting this presentation and doing the work that you've already done to get us ready for the season. Take what rest you can, and hopefully I don't see you soon, but we'll be around. We'll see each other soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. Lovely to see all your faces.
Thanks, everyone.